Hello everyone, and welcome to our Kitchen Garden Cooking School class on kale today. While we allow everybody to join our webinar, and we'll give everybody a minute to join us here today, I have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to cover. This class is all about kale, and you will find on the Eventbrite page that we have a couple wonderful handouts for you that we will be covering in class today. We have a My Plate handout, a packet of handouts that will include a growing guide for kale, and the 3 recipes that I will demonstrate here today. So if you can't find those, don't worry, we'll send them out afterwards, but they are on the Eventbrite landing page for this webinar today. Also, while we're waiting for everyone to join us, you can go ahead and find the chat box. If you have any questions or comments today, please feel free to chat those in. I would love to hear from you. When you are chatting or commenting, please go ahead and choose the drop-down menu at the bottom of your chat box that says all participants or all panelists and attendees. That makes sure that the comment will go to everybody so we all know what everyone is commenting about. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, this is Kitchen Garden Cooking School, our class on kale. My name is Becca, and I work here at Tarrant Area Food Bank. With me today, joining us virtually, is our nutrition instructor, Elena O'Daniel, and she is a county extension agent. So she's very knowledgeable and will be providing us information on why it's such a great idea to eat lots of kale in our diets. So today we're going to cover several different topics, and all of it is going to be about kale. First, we're going to talk about how to grow kale in your garden. Then Elena will talk to us about all the great reasons we should eat kale. We'll go over a few shopping tips, and then I will demonstrate 3 different recipes that you can make with kale to help you enjoy. And that's really the whole point of this class, is that there are so many fruits and vegetables that we can grow here and that are available to us in the grocery stores. And so we want to find ways to enjoy them, especially if we're growing them in our garden and we have an abundance of them. We want to find several different ways that we can enjoy the same type of produce. So the main reason we're talking about kale today is because it's in season. And what does in season mean? You may have heard that term before. In season means that the produce item is being grown and harvested right now. It's the time when it comes out of the garden, out of the farms, and makes its way to our grocery shelves. So typically, those produce items are going to be very, very fresh. They're going to come from nearby and take less time to get to the grocery store shelves or to our refrigerators if it's coming from our garden. They're going to typically be higher in nutritional value. They may be less expensive, and they're going to take fewer resources like fossil fuels to transport to us because they're coming from nearby. So we're actually a little ahead of kale season, but it's just about time to be getting kale into the garden. And some of you may even have kale in your garden right now. So a few different growing tips. I'm just going to give you the basics, and then if you would like, you can refer to the growing guide in your handout. And please feel free to comment in if you have any questions or comments that you would like to add. Is anybody growing kale right now? Do you have any kale left over from last fall? Or maybe you are getting a head start on your cool season gardening for this year. That being said, kale does prefer cool weather. It can be extended and grown throughout the year if you have it in just the right spot. But I've always found that our really hot Texas summers, which we're experiencing right now, will get the best eventually. So if you're planning to plant kale in your garden this year, this fall, you can plant typically between and October 1st. So we are right in that planting time frame. If you feel like it, you can continue to plant kale after October 1st. I know sometimes warm and may extend that kind of summer feeling. So as long as it's not, there's no risk of frost, you can go ahead and plant your kale in your garden. So kale loves cool weather. It likes full sun, 6 to 8 hours a day, but it can handle a little bit less sun. It's one of those leafy greens that doesn't quite need 8 hours. So if you have a spot that you're having trouble growing anything else, maybe try some kale there. It's a nice leafy green that can handle 4 to 6 hours of sun, but may perform a little bit better at 8 hours. Kale is so versatile. There's so many different varieties, and It can be grown in lots of different areas. You can grow it in a container if you've got a patio, or you just like to mix in some containers with your raised beds. Go for it. It loves containers. You can also plant your kale directly in your raised bed or right in the ground. It's pretty adaptable, so you may want to amend your soil just a little bit if you're planting right in the ground, but it's pretty tough. It can handle our Texas soil here. On the back of your growing guide, you'll find some items that you may find are going wrong with your plant, maybe some different pests or diseases that are causing your plant trouble. And so you can look at that guide on the back to figure out what might be wrong with your plant and what you could do to fix it. But again, it's a pretty tough plant. There's not too much that will defeat it, and it does well year round. So if you're new to gardening, this is a great plant to try. So if you have any questions about gardening, and it looks like we did have a question come in, feel free to put those in the chat box, and I would love to answer your questions today. So let's see what that question is. So we've got the question, do different varieties of kale taste the same? That is an amazing question, and I'm going to hold off on that for just a minute until after Elena gives us the nutrition information. But I'm going to talk about these different types of kale and a few others, and what recipes they would be great in, and if you're new to kale or still not convinced that you like it, which one might be a good one to try. So I promise I will get to that question, but first I would love for Elena to tell us all the great reasons that we should eat kale. Elena?
There's a lot of great reasons to eat kale, Becca, I would also put myself firmly in the camp of I'm not entirely sure that I love kale, but I'm open to trying a lot of different great recipes about kale. So before we get started, this is a document I'm sure y'all have seen before, and this is on My Plate. We have 5 different food groups, and the My Plate serves as a guideline for how we should ideally structure our plate for each mealtime. So we want to include some dairy foods, some fruits, some vegetables, some grains, and some protein. And as you can kind of see, fruits and vegetables take up about half of our plate. And when we're looking at the different fruits and vegetables we want to be eating, we want to be trying to eat a lot of different colors. And when I say colors, I mean like red foods, green foods, orange foods, purple foods, because all of those different colors mean that there's different nutrients there. So eating a wide variety of colors means you're getting a wide variety of nutrients. And kale is going to sit firmly in our vegetable food group. And a serving of kale is about half a cup of cooked kale or 1 cup of raw kale. So if you're putting it in a salad, 1 cup of raw kale is going to count as a serving of vegetables. And kale is a very nutrient dense but calorie low food. So 1 serving of kale, so again that half cup of cooked or the 1 cup of raw, is going to run you about 33 calories, but about 2.4 grams of fiber, which is incredible. And that fiber in the kale promotes heart health by lowering cholesterol, and it also helps promote a healthy blood sugar control as well. And kale is also a significant source of one of my favorite nutrients, a little known nutrients called lutein. And lutein actually sits in the back of your eyeball and helps absorb some of that blue light that we get from a lot of our screens, and helps promote eye health by really sitting in that eye and absorbing some of that blue light so we don't get some of the free radicals from that blue light. Kale is also a significant source of antioxidants, and you can tell which fruits and vegetables, mostly vegetables, are high in antioxidants by how bitter they taste. So kale is a pretty bitter vegetable, and whenever you taste that bitterness, think, antioxidants. These antioxidants are going to help fight inflammation, and they're going to support detoxification in the body, and they're also just going to fight inflammation as well. So when you taste bitter, think antioxidants, think health. And kale is also a great source of calcium and iron. And what's great about the calcium and iron that we find in kale versus other leafy greens is that kale has a low oxalate content, which makes the calcium and the iron super absorbable. We see high oxalate contents in other leafy greens like spinach, which means we can't absorb a lot of some of the iron and calcium that are in there. But kale has a low oxalate content, so we're great there. Kale is also a significant source of vitamin K, and vitamin K helps the blood clot, and it also tells that calcium in the kale where to go. It tells it to go to the bones or wherever else it's needed, rather than sitting in our arteries and calcifying in our arteries, which is really, really needed. Last but not least, kale is also a significant source of vitamin C, which promotes immune health, bone health, brain health, promotes health all over the body, quite honestly. So fantastic vegetable. You're not going to go wrong putting it in your diet. Very versatile, as Becca will show us. Absolutely love kale and love leafy greens.
All right, thank you so much, Elena. If y'all have any questions for Elena, please feel free to put those in the chat box. She can always answer there, or we'll give her another moment at the end of class to jump back in with some more great answers to any nutrition questions that you have. Thanks so much, Elena. All right, so now let's dig into, of course, the best part of the class. I'm going to show you 3 great ways to prepare kale. So just as a reminder, we do have these handouts on the Eventbrite page, and if for some reason you can't get to them right now, don't worry, we will send them out afterwards. So you're going to get that My Plate handout that Elena was talking about, the growing guide for kale, and the 3 recipes that I am just about to demonstrate. So to jump back to the question that we had before, do all kales taste the same? There are so many varieties out there. So if you're planning to grow some in your garden this year, I would encourage you to try a few different kinds, because you might find that you like one more than the other. I definitely have a preference, a favorite type of kale. So I'll start with the ones that you can find in the grocery store. These are the 3 that I found today. Typically there's one other one, but I'm going to cover these first. So this one you have probably seen. This is curly leaf kale. It's green, nice and vibrant, kind of bouncy. Was used as decoration on buffets for a long time before we all started liking kale. So this is curly leaf. You will most likely be able to find this at the grocery store. It comes in green, and it also comes in purple. If you grow it in the garden, you might even be able to get a really dark purple curly leaf kale. It's beautiful. It comes in a lot of great colors. The other one that I was able to find today was the Dinosaur Kale, also called Lacinato Kale. This is kind of the wrinkly one, looks like dinosaur skin. I don't know if y'all can see that with our fancy new camera, but this has a wonderful texture. If you've ever made kale chips, you probably used this kind of kale. If you're cooking kale, this one is probably the best one to use. The Lacinato or the Dinosaur Kale is same thing. It's a little bit tougher, and so if you're cooking it in a soup or baking it in the oven, it's going to fare a little bit better, but use whatever kale you have on hand. The curly leaf is what I would recommend for eating it fresh. It's going to have a little bit of a softer texture, a less intense flavor. So to answer the question earlier, do they all taste the same? I think they have very similar flavors. It's just kind of on a spectrum of intensity. So typically the darker it is or the thicker the leaf, the more intense it's going to taste. So if you're not quite convinced about kale yet, try one of the softer, lighter colored ones first. The other variety that you will typically find in the grocery store is called Red Russian. It actually looks a whole lot like this guy here, except for it has a flatter leaf. So it has the same beautiful purple vein with kind of a green colored leaf, but it's flatter. And that's typically the variety that they use in salad mixes. They'll use the baby leaf of the Red Russian. So that's going to be a really versatile leaf. It can be eaten raw when it's smaller, more tender, cooked when it's a little bit larger. The other variety, if you're interested in growing some this year, my preference is Siberian Kale. Siberian Kale is going to have about the same color as our green curly leaf kale, but it's going to have a flatter leaf, it's thinner, and it has a less intense flavor. So if you're not quite convinced or you just prefer a more mild flavor, give Siberian Kale a try. You can typically find that as a transplant at a garden nursery or even a seed packet if you're ordering seeds online or going to the store to buy your seeds. So Siberian Kale, that's my favorite. I'm sure everybody has their preference and they all have different places in the kitchen. So the recipes that we're going to make today, we're going to make a soup, a spicy sausage and kale soup. It's got potatoes and onions and is really hearty. That's the one we're going to start with. Then we're gonna move to a sauteed kale with quinoa dish, and one's really a nice hearty side dish. And then I've got a wonderful salad for us as well, which convinced me to like kale. So kale is not the easiest plant to like. It has a very intense flavor, and so if you're not really keen on that, it may be hard to enjoy. However, I think we have some great options for you here, and I hope that you will try them at home as well. So to get our soup ready, I am going to go ahead and warm our pot up. I've prepped everything else here today besides our kale so that we can move quickly through these recipes. I may not get to show you the finished product on all of them, but I'll walk you through the steps and you've got the recipes to take with you. So we'll go ahead and warm up our pan here. We've got a large saucepan. It is a soup. This soup, you can make it with spicy sausage, or if you prefer, you can use a more mild sausage. If you prefer to go meatless, you could replace the sausage with some mushrooms or maybe a meatless sausage option. I've tried some recently that are pretty comparable to the real deal. I myself prefer to not eat that much meat, so I would probably omit it or replace it with something in this recipe. But that is up to you. It's perfectly wonderful with the sausage as well. So to get us started again, I started heating up our pan here. We're gonna put in our oil, and then we're gonna add in our onion and our garlic. So we've got our onion and garlic already prepped here. Nice small pieces. It is a soup. You don't want a really large chunk of something in there. So we've got our pan warming first. We're gonna go ahead and put our oil in. All right. And I did go ahead and cook our sausage. You do want to cook the sausage before you put it in the soup. So if you need to do that ahead of time, the day before, you're doing some meal prep and you want to get that ready, that can be done ahead of time and put in the fridge until you're ready to make the soup. All right. This soup is perfect for these rainy days we're having right now, especially once we get towards winter when it cools off a little bit more. This soup has a very warm, comforting flavor, and it's very healthy too. Okay, so we've got our pot warmed up. We've got our oil in there warm. We're going to get our onion and garlic in the pan. We're going to give that a quick stir. And we're going to allow that to saute for just a little bit here. I'm going to give it about a couple of minutes. 3 to 5 minutes is what your recipe says, to allow it to become translucent. And while we wait for it, I'm going to go ahead and show you what we're doing with our kale. So for this recipe, I chose to use our Dinosaur Kale. Since we're cooking it, this is a great recipe for Dinosaur Kale. This is where, this task right here, de-stemming your kale. So this typically is going to be very bitter. You can leave it in if you want. I prefer to take it out. But that middle stem is going to be very bitter. So if you've got some helping hands in the kitchen, having your children or nieces and nephew help you prepare dinner, this is a great task for them. You could do this by hand or you can use a knife. So you simply just tear the leaf from the stem, and we're going to cut it up anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to take it off in one rip. It could come off in pieces. So all different kinds of small hands can help with this task. So we're going to get that stem out of there. You can also use a knife if you prefer. That would be a little bit quicker maybe. And you could just go down the vein on each side. And there it is. So we're going to get those out of the way here. I find it easiest to cut it with the back side of the leaf facing up. That way you can get really close to that stem. Again, you don't have to cut it out. It's just a little bit bitter, and so most people prefer to take that out. So for this recipe, our Dinosaur Kale, and make sure we don't burn our onions here. We're going to cut into bite-sized pieces. It's going to cook down a little bit, so it doesn't have to be really small, but we're just going to roughly chop this. So I like to stack the leaves together so that I don't have to cut each individual leaf. Kind of stack it and fold it. You're going to take your chef's knife and you're going to just give it a rough chop. If you would like, you could also tear this by hand. That would be another task that you could have some help with in the kitchen. We're going to do a nice sawing motion, keeping our fingers out of the way. If you prefer smaller bites, go ahead and make some smaller bites. But again, it will cook down. Okay, so we've got that cut. I'm going to go ahead and add our salt, pepper, and red pepper flakes to our onion and garlic mixture. If you prefer something that's not as spicy, please omit the red pepper flakes. That's fine with me if it's fine with you. Don't want to make it unenjoyable for you. All right, again, we're going to keep cooking this. The onions will need just a few minutes. So it's a great time for questions. If you have any questions or comments, we're going to need just a minute for these onions to keep cooking. So while we're waiting for that, I'll show you what else I have to put in our dish here. Let's see, we've got our kale. We'll get this all together in a bowl. So we've got our kale chopped up nicely here. Some nice small pieces. They don't have to be uniform. We have our sausage. So we've got, I chose spicy chicken sausage today. Cooked that up ahead of time. I think that's going to make for a wonderfully warm flavor to go with the rest of these ingredients. All right. You can let these onions caramelize a little bit longer if you would like, but for today's purposes, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next step of our recipe. We're going to be adding our kale. So I'm going to add this in batches. It's going to cook down pretty good, just like spinach would. It's a green. It's not going to cook down quite as much as spinach, but it will cook down quite a bit. All right, so spoon. I'm going to give this a good mix and let it start to wilt. You'll see it will work pretty quickly. I can smell the red pepper flakes. A little bit spicy, but it goes very nicely with the rest of these ingredients. I'm going to let that wilt down just a little bit longer and show you what I did. So I used regular baking potatoes. You could use red or Yukon Gold if you have that on hand. And I just cut them into very thin slices. You could cut that even smaller if you would like, or if you prefer a nice big chunk of potato, you could cube them. It'll just take a little bit longer to cook. You cut your potatoes. So 4 medium potatoes is plenty. That's what your recipe calls for. It'll be a hearty meal here. Okay, so our kale and our onion are cooking down nicely. Pardon me. So next we will want to add the nutmeg and give that a quick stir around everything. That nutmeg, it seems a little out of place in this recipe, but it's going to bring in more of those warm flavors and draw everything together. All right, so give that a quick stir. What do y'all like to make with kale? Go ahead and chat that in the box. What's your favorite thing to do? I know some people like to add kale to smoothies, maybe put it in an omelet in the morning. What do you like to do with your kale? Kale salads are very popular. Hopefully you'll enjoy our kale salad here today. So go ahead and share that with everybody. What do you do with kale? Okay, while y'all are chatting that in, I'm gonna add in our potatoes and our cooked sausage and let that mix that around here just for a minute. I'm excited to see what y'all do with kale. There's so many things. It's very versatile. It's a great plant to grow, provides us with lots of nutrients, and also can be used in many different ways in the kitchen. And you may find that you want to add more kale to this soup. You want to make sure that we get this mixed around very well. So we're going to combine this here, and then we're going to get the broth in. All right, so I see some people like to make kale chips in the oven, some nice crunchy salads. Ooh, kale and pasta would be good. I like that one. It's always good to add a few greens into your pasta dishes. And a veggie hash, that sounds wonderful. The kale is such a great cool season crop, and it goes really well with some other like root vegetables, which also are grown in the cool weather. So it's a really great complement for a lot of our crops that we're growing at about the same time. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this demonstration portion by adding in our broth. If you wanna use, you don't have to use 8 cups of broth, I know that's a lot. If you want to cut it in half and maybe add some water instead, that's totally fine. Chicken broth or veggie broth, whatever your preference. Out the sausage for vegetables, then you'll probably want to use a vegetable broth. All right, so what we want to do here is we want to bring this back up to a boil and then let it simmer for about 15 minutes until the potatoes are nice and soft. Again, if you made your potatoes a little bit bigger, a little bit more time. So just test it every once in a while. And then the last step before you're ready to serve is you're gonna add your heavy cream. You totally don't have to add this. This is an optional step, but it does make for a really nice soup. We have a question come in. Oh, if you're using mushrooms, when to add? I would probably saute them first to give them kind of the same texture as your sausage. You could marinate them with some seasonings that would be similar to what you would find in sausage. So you might check what if you're looking at a package of sausage, what seasonings go there. So probably some salt, pepper, maybe some Italian seasonings, and then a little bit of cayenne pepper or red pepper flakes would give you a spicy Italian sausage. So mushrooms, you probably chop them up fairly finely, saute them beforehand, and then add them in when you would add the sausage. I could see it being done the other way as well, adding them in raw towards the end. You'll just get a different texture depending on when you add them. Okay, so we're gonna let this come to a boil here. Again, about 15 minutes. Potatoes are nice and soft. You'll turn off the heat, add in your heavy cream, half and half if you prefer, or a plant-based dairy product would be fine as well. And then you're gonna be to serve that warm. Okay, for my other 2 recipes, I'm gonna have you follow me over to this other side here. All right, let me get set up while y'all get set up as well. So the first recipe is going to be our sauteed kale with quinoa. A few similar ingredients here. We're going to get our skillet warmed up. And then we're gonna add our oil, our onion, and our garlic. So again, I've done a lot of the prep ahead of time so that we can focus on our kale today. So we'll let the pan get warmed up. Let's let our pan get warmed up. Here we go, pan. Okay. So what we wanna do is we want to warm that skillet up. We've got our oil handy. I cooked the quinoa ahead of time. You can cook it while you're preparing the rest of the ingredients. But I've got everything measured out here so that it's really easy to just jump in and prepare right away. Okay, for this recipe, we are going to use the curly leaf. It's gonna give a really fun texture to this dish, and it's a little bit more tender than the dinosaur kale because we're not cooking as long. Okay, so we'll see how our here. Let that warm up and add our oil. And I'm going to show you a different way to cut kale this time. So it's kind of a fun trick. So we'll add our oil and let that warm up. Again, we've got our onions chopped our garlic already minced. So for the onions, nice small pieces because this dish has a finer texture. Our soup or even our salad, make sure that the pieces match. You can get a bite of everything in each spoonful. Okay, so we'll get our oil warmed up here and spread out on our pan and get that ready to add. All right, that's looking really good. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add our onion and our garlic. Give that a quick stir. You're gonna need a lid on your skillet for this dish to help the kale steam. So if you don't have a lid, you can always use a baking sheet to cover your pan for that step of the process. I chose to use this skillet because I do have a lid for it, but I would really actually prefer a skillet that's a little bit bigger. My large skillet doesn't have a lid, so I chose this one for today. So it'll be a little full, but it will work. Okay, so again, we're gonna wanna let this saute, and while we are doing that so that everything softens, I'm gonna get our kale ready. Okay. Okay, so for our kale, again, we're using the curly leaf green kale, and we've got it chopped into some bite-sized pieces. It will cook down, and I'm going to show you a fun little tool that you can buy if you would like, if you think you'd use it. I use it mostly for greens and herbs. If you can see this here, this is a de-stemmer. It comes with several different holes depending on the size of your stem, and it even has very small holes at the top here for herbs. It also has kind of a sharp edge. It's not sharp enough to cut you or anything, but it could help cut your herbs if you would like. It won't work very well for kale, but for herbs it'll work. So what you do to make this work, and it's great if you have a lot of kale to prep, is you take the end of the stem and you find the hole that it best fits in pretty well. So you're going to hold your de-stemmer and you're going to drag your kale all the way through. Check that out. So you could use a knife, or you could have your children help in the kitchen, or you could use a de-stemmer. So that's one of my favorite fun tools. You can find that at any of your big box stores, your home goods stores, kitchen gadgets, and it's usually less than $5. So if that's something you think you would use often, otherwise a knife or your hands will work just fine. Just wanted to give you another option. So I'm going to go ahead and finish those up. I've got a few more pieces here to use. You'll notice we didn't use our purple curly leaf kale today. You definitely could. You could mix in green with the purple. It'll probably lose a little bit of its color as you're cooking. But it's totally fine to mix those up if you wanted to. Okay, see how fast that is? And it gets rid of that bitter stem. This stem is a lot thicker than the one that we saw in the Dinosaur Kale, so you probably definitely want to get rid of that one. Yeah, it's a perfect place for it. Or if you have chickens, they may enjoy it as well. Rabbits, use those pieces of vegetables that you're not going to eat elsewhere. Okay, so to cut these again, I'm going to stack them up like I did before. Instead of cutting each leaf individually. And I'm going to kind of fold them in half. I've already got a few little pieces that are straggling here. That's fine. It's about the size I wanted. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half and use my chef's knife again. A little bit contained here. And then if you wanted to, you could go back the other way. You can put your fingers up on top of the knife and just kind of do another chop over your kale to make sure you don't have any very large pieces. Okay. All right, our next step, and I think I'm probably going to make our salad while we're waiting on this next step, is we're gonna get this kale steaming. So I'm gonna have to add it in batches because like I said, my pan is not as big as I would ideally like, and you'll see that here in just a minute. But it will cook down like our soup did. So I'm gonna put in about half of it and give it a good stir. You could work in smaller batches if you prefer. I'm gonna coat it with the oil. I'm having to be more careful because again, I would have liked a bigger pan. I'll make a different choice next time. It's already cooking down and giving me some more room here. You can see I've got a lot more space in my pan. So just work with it. You've got some time. All right, go ahead and add some more. You don't want to wait too long between adding batches. Have some different cooked times there. All right, so we got all of it in there. And then once it's cooked down enough, I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of water and put the lid on and let it steam. And while we do that, we'll make our salad. The salad is very quick. One of my favorite dishes is the salad that we're gonna make next. I typically will make it at Christmas or Thanksgiving. The flavors complement the other dishes very well. Okay, so I think we've got enough room there. We'll put in our water, 2 tablespoons to do it. We're gonna cover that up. Okay, while we're doing that, let me get this out of the way. I'm gonna show you our salad. So for the salad, again, we're gonna use the green leaf, curly green leaf kale. Beautiful, beautiful. When you're shopping for the kale at the store, make sure you get nice, bright, vibrant leaves that are firm. You don't want anything that's wilty. Sometimes you may not have a huge choice, but pick the best you can. You will find that sometimes you get some spots or some yellowing. You can just tear that piece right off. You don't need that. It doesn't have to be a perfect leaf, just mostly perfect. So for this salad, we're going to chop into 9 pieces, and we're going to basically, there's not a whole lot of prep for this, so this is fantastic. So we've got our salad bowl here, the leaves already. Again, I'm going to go ahead and use this de-stemmer. It's been very handy for me. Find the hole that fits and go ahead and strip the leaves off of the stem. And then we're going to roughly chop and add to the bowl to make these nice bite-sized pieces. Again, you want to get a little bit of everything in each bite. You can tell I'm a big fan of that, getting all the flavors together. I like getting a little bit of everything with each bite. All right, got all the stems out of there, especially if you're eating your kale raw. Having the stems out will help you enjoy it a lot better, unless you're a big fan of bitter flavors, and you may be, that's totally fine. You can leave those stems in there. All right. So again, kind of stack it all together. Give it a chop. We're almost done here, folks, so if you have any questions, please feel free to chat those in the chat box. Again, we'll have the handouts emailed out afterwards, just in case you weren't able to get to them. And we've got recordings of lots of our other workshops on our YouTube page, and we'll send out a link to that also afterwards. Okay, so got this chopped up here. Gonna add it to the bowl. The other ingredients that we have for this salad, we've got some apples, some pecans, some dried cranberries, and some feta cheese. So if you're a fan of fruit and nut salads, you will enjoy this one as well. A tip for kale salads is that it's okay to dress them a little bit early. If you've got an oil and vinegar based dressing, if you add that on a little bit early. That will help to marinate the kale leaves and make it a little bit more palatable, make it a little more enjoyable for you. So we have our bowl of lovely green kale here. I chose a Fiji apple and I cut it into nice small pieces. You could cut them even smaller if you prefer. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 apples. You can peel it, you can leave the skin on. I like to leave the skin on for those extra nutrients and extra crunch. So along each stiff of the way, we're going to give this a little bit of a toss. I think, like I was saying before, I like to serve this at Thanksgiving. It has a nice fall flavor to it and goes well with the other dishes that are served. You'll find lots of pecan and cranberry on our Thanksgiving dishes. If you have walnuts, use walnuts instead. If you want to use raisins instead. Please feel free to change the recipe as you wish. All right, so that's steaming nicely. Probably want to turn it on just a little bit so it doesn't burn to the bottom. When that's done, steaming, we'll add our quinoa and our cheese and breadcrumbs. Okay, so next for our salad. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit today. We've got our pecans and our cranberries. On the back of each of your handouts is the nutrition facts label for each recipe. So if you would like to see if you can add a little bit more of something, or if you want to have a larger serving, depending on your calorie needs, go ahead and make those adjustments. But that information is there for you to use. I'm going to add our dressing before I add the cheese. So our dressing is honey, apple cider vinegar, oil, salt, and pepper. It's a really wonderful dressing. I like these jars because you can kind of see the different layers. I'm going to mix this up, make sure our honey is incorporated with the other ingredients. You can use a bottled dressing if you prefer, that's fine. Something with a little bit of sweetness in it, but also we want that acid in the vinegar to help soften the kale leaves. Okay. So we'll go ahead and dish that out. Give it a good toss, and again, you can mix this ahead of time. If you want to prepare this, a couple hours before you have dinner or before you have people coming over, that would work out really well. And you'll see it shrink a little bit from the weight of the dressing. That'll help soften it. Smells delicious. That apple cider vinegar is really fragrant. Okay, and then we'll sprinkle our cheese on top. You can mix that in, or if you've got some folks that don't do dairy, just serve that on the side. Super easy. Got our salad ready. We're gonna have our side dish and our soup as well. Let me finish this recipe up. Again, any final questions, please feel free to chat those in. I'm going to turn this down again. Make sure we mix this nicely. The kale looks nice and wilted, nice and soft. We're going to go ahead and mix in our dash of salt. And this recipe also has red pepper flakes, but please omit those if you would like. The salad we want to serve cold. You could, room temperature is fine. You don't want to heat that up. The side dish, I think you could enjoy either way. It's served warm. You might give it a try after you maybe have some leftovers. See if it's good cold. Okay, so we've got the red pepper flakes and salt mixed in here. We're going to go ahead and mix in our quinoa and turn off the heat. You could use brown rice if you would like. I think this would be another fun one you could do with pasta. Maybe just pasta and the onion and kale. But this particular recipe is called for quinoa. Lots of protein, have a nice grain there as well with your kale. And your onions is looking great. We're going to add in our cheese and our breadcrumbs to kind of finish it off. You'll want to give it a good stir until everything is mixed together. I'm going to get this out of the way here. And then we'll be wrapping up. I hope y'all will give these recipes a try. It's really helped me learn to enjoy kale. Again, we want to eat healthy and we want to enjoy what we're eating. Like Elena said, we want to get all those food groups in throughout the day. And if we can mix them all together and enjoy them in some great flavor combinations, that will help us be able to make some healthier choices and make the healthy choice the easy choice. We can enjoy our food and have healthy food also. Okay, so this looks wonderful. Our soup is about done. Remember, you're going to add that cream in there at the very end. So those are the recipes I have for you today, folks. And we've got those handouts that we'll send out afterwards. We'll have the link to our YouTube site so you can see our past workshops. And we hope you will join us again. You can visit our Eventbrite page. Elena, if you want to pop back on and give everybody a wave, we appreciate you being here today to give us the great nutrition information. Kale is such a wonderful food, easy to grow, easy to enjoy, and it provides us with a lot of nutrients. And I hope you're inspired today to try some kale recipes, to grow some kale. Really, if you're just starting out with gardening, kale is kind of a fail-safe. It's pretty easy to grow. So I know I've got my kale plants ready to plant here in just a week or two. I'm gonna see if this cool weather holds on for a little bit longer and get them out in the garden so I can start enjoying kale just as soon as possible. All right, thanks y'all so much for joining us today. We hope you'll join us here again for another Kitchen Garden Cooking School workshop. We also have some other gardening workshops coming up as well. Thank you, stay safe.